Hello, and welcome to Strange Dominions, where we attempt to unlock the mysteries of the unseen and unheard, unknown and unknowable. I am your host, Octavian Graves. Tonight, I will be speaking with Chad Redding, woodsman, co-host on Strange Familiars, and owner and proprietor of Ruck Rabbit Outdoors. We speak on many topics, including how Chad got into the paranormal, his most interesting and harrowing investigations and experiences, and much more. If you have seen something strange or unusual, such as a cryptid, UFO, spirit, or anything in between, please send me an email at strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com. If you are enjoying the show and want to get access to exclusive content such as merchandise and extra episodes, you can become a patron starting at just $4 a month to get all that and much more. I asked my patrons this question, but I thought I'd open it up to everyone else. How would you feel if I introduced each episode with the date of the interview, the planetary day and hour of the interview, and the moon phase of that interview? Let me know in the comments below. Without further ado, I bring you my interview with Chad Redding. All right. Tonight, I am here with woodsman, paranormal investigator, co-host of Strange Familiars, Chad Redding. How you doing, Chad?
I'm doing fine tonight. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really glad to have you on. I know that we tried this a couple days or a week or so ago, and we got foiled by the power, so I'm glad we can try it again.
Oh, not an issue.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start at the beginning here. Where did your adventure in the paranormal begin, both privately and with Strange Familiars?
Privately, I would say that I've always had adventures in it. I just never fully embraced it. I grew up in an area known as the Pigeon Hills, and it has a lot of weird stuff happen there a lot. And I've had adventures when I was a teenager and as a child, because I always roamed that area, and there was always something bizarro going on, and I never really thought anything of it, and I always kind of wrote it off. And then a few years ago, I had a encounter at a trail called White Rocks, and it was very how would you say this, very eye-opening was the best way to say it. And I had never heard of this podcast world. It never was on my radar at the time. And a friend of mine told me about Strange Familiars and said, "You need to listen to this podcast." He goes, "They talk about this thing called the flannel man," and he's like, "You're the flannel man because you always wear black and red plaid." And that just kind of was something that happened, and the fact that I'm always like looking for wool clothing for in the woods. And started listening to the podcast, listened to a couple episodes, and I realized that Tim was very close to me as far as living in York County. So I contacted him, and I wanted to tell him about my experience I had at White Rocks. And he's like, "Well, can you take me there?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I took him there, and we had a good time, and we hit it off, And then we were to each other one more time, and I was just kind of like, "Yeah, there's this area I want to go camping at called Pandemonium, and I can set it up for us." And I basically set everything up, and I said, "Hey, are you down?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And it just kind of went from there. We just kind of fell into it with him. It was never intended or purposeful, but here I am now. Well, actually, it's over 3 years, almost 4 years later.
That's really awesome, and you are such an awesome part of Strange Familiars. I've always really enjoyed the Onsite shows with you and Tim. And speaking of that, what are some, as far as the Onsite shows and the investigations that you guys have done, what are some of the notable ones and the experiences that still kind of stick with you?
Well, as far as ones that stick with me, they all kind of do. There are some similarities between each experience, but every place we've gone to has had its own feel and beat. I would say Pandemonium really stands out. That has become like kind of the gold standard, I should say, that we compare all the other experiences to, as far as intensity goes. We also, Site 7 is just a place that also stands out. We use that also as another standard for like if we ever see any lights, we automatically compare it to Site 7. Site 7 is not a place I'm particularly fond of. It takes a good bit to rattle me, but that place has rattled me twice, at least when we were at the one spot. But I would say definitely Pandemonium is one that stands out, with the bridge a close second, because the bridge in Gettysburg, Eisenhower Bridge, is one that's really was a lot of work and was more ongoing compared to the other ones.
Yeah, I know that we spoke a bit about the bridge when Luke and I had you and Tim on, but do you want to talk a little bit about that, just on on your own in your own experiences, what you feel about the bridge and kind of how it affected you?
Yeah, sure. So where do you want me to start?
Well, I know that it at one point shared your name, correct?
Yeah, actually, all the land around the bridge and the bridge itself actually had my last name. Was owned by a Redding family. I don't know if it's directly related to me. I haven't done the genealogy, but somewhere back in the distant past, we're related. And the farm itself is across some fields and over a hill a little bit, is actually the Eisenhower farm. He purchased the Redding farm to retire on, but all the land and the bridge itself were at one time owned by Reddings, which was just kind of a weird synchronicity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, does that have to do with what happened to me there as far as like the intensity of experiences that I had there and continue to have? I don't know. It could be, but who knows these things?
Yeah. But so what are some of the experiences that you've had? I know that you saw a very large shadowy figure walk across the bridge, and I know that the bridge has a very physical effect on you.
Yeah. Seeing a shadowy figure. I've seen multiple lights there with Tim. Really bizarro noises. The time we were there and the bridge was banging and carrying on, and it was not due to temperature change. It was like in the middle of the night, and when we had that loud thump underneath our feet, you could literally feel the bridge vibrate. That was definitely eye-opening. And that ended the night because we were pretty much done anyways, but that was kind of like, yeah, you're done. And also just a feeling of like I get sick if I'm there for any amount of time, especially the first and second time I was there. It really affected me. And just I don't know, for some reason the place draws me. I will go there. I just feel the urge still to go there. I've gone there numerous times on my own. I've had some experiences also at night there on my own. So,
You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I don't know if I've heard that.
No, we're kind of saving them. I hate to tell you
no.
but...
Yeah, no, you got to keep your secrets. I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, I've had. What I will say is, like, I've had seen some strange things that I didn't see when we were there. When I was there with Tim. Numerous times I've taken pictures during the day, and you can actually see like almost a mist on the camera, but not on the human eye. Like the spot that we call the cold spot, which is where you really kind of feel that draining. It always seems to have like a mist there, at least in the camera view. It's really bizarre. I mean, it can be a nice, shiny, sunny day, and you take this picture and you just see this distortion. And no, it's not heat distortion, but it looks like a mist there. And even during the day, like, what's really crazy about the bridge is you've been there, right? Correct?
Yeah, I went there last year around, I guess,
Okay.
December or November. I was hiking through the Catoctin Mountains, which is basically the south end of Michaud. And
Hmm.
I needed a Christmas gift, and I was like, all right, well, let me just go to Pennsylvania and maybe Gettysburg and find something for family. And while I was there, I stopped at the bridge. Nothing really happened. I think I took a phone recording. I haven't listened to that yet, but I didn't really feel like I was getting anything.
Right. Right. Well, what's really weird about the bridge is you're not in the middle of nowhere, but yet when you're at the bridge, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere.
I can attest to that. Yeah, it definitely had
What
a solitary effect on me.
it's strange. I mean, you go not even a couple feet, or I shouldn't say a couple feet, but you drive down the road not even a quarter of a mile, and also you're like, oh, I'm just I'm just near a town or suburbia, and you just there's houses close to the place, but it's so strange when you're at the bridge. It just feels kind of isolated. That's
Yeah,
the better way to say it.
yeah. I didn't realize that the road that I came on, it was right next to the house that's right at the bridge, and so I kind of had to
Hmm.
park my car like right in front of these people's house, and I was like, oh, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I like, is there another parking area? So I wasn't sure.
Right, right. Well, they have put signs up since then. So really, the only place to park at the bridge now is at the bridge on the Red Rock Road side. So you should. So don't, if you do go there, and anybody else who listens to this and goes there, do not park on that side on the road that runs from Saxbridge to there. There's like a little section of road, and they have there's posts up to stop cars from driving on there, because you're not supposed to be driving cars on there. Don't park there, because they will tow you now. So
Well, that's
just
good to know.
just for a little piece of information. Yeah. So park on the Red Rock Road side. You're good there. You're good there. So,
Yeah, and
but
and I
but
will say that the woods around the bridge are very, very sparse. And so
hmm
I think I went back after realizing that and listened to the Witch Cloud and all the weird stuff that you guys were seeing in the woods. And it kind of reminded me a little bit about kazoos, because you guys had a lot of crazy experiences in kazoos, and that's a favorite spot of mine. And there's no woods there. I mean, there's trees, but it's not nearly as forested as I think people think about when they think about Bigfoot or any kind of these forest dwelling creatures living there. It's so sparse.
oh yeah, yeah. Are you referring to Gazoos, or are you referring to the bridge? Just so I know which to comment on properly.
The bridge.
Yes, yes. The woods on either side of the bridge. The one side's more thicker. Basically, it's just whatever woods run along the creek there, and the other side is really sparse. If you're facing the bridge, the other side that's really sparse is the left-hand side. Now, there are trees that run along the creek, and you have the open fields, and we've had phenomenon happen in the fields. Even as we're walking down the road, we were being paced by something in the creek, which you hear that in the witch cloud. But no, it is very sparse. And what's crazy is the sightings that have happened of Bigfoot along Willoughby Run. There was one south of that. I think it was some child had bumped into like a 5 to 6 foot furry creature or hair covered creature, was not a bear. There was another on the road, the main road. I forget the name of that road that runs where you turn off Red Rock Road, where it crosses Willoughby, bridge crosses Willoughby Run. People there, I think there's 2 or 3 sightings of Bigfoot crossing the road there in front of cars. And then, of course, you have that sighting that we also referred to in town in Gettysburg of something at a KFC late at night of a Bigfoot type creature eating chicken out of the dumpster. you know?
Oh, okay.
So none of that area is deep woods. None of it, and it's really bizarro. And what's funny is if you take those sightings and you do, you triangulate them, the bridge is in the middle.
Oh, okay. Wow.
For what that's worth. So,
Yeah,
but
it's
yeah,
interesting.
I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nothing. Just the location and the relation to all these places is really interesting, and I do feel that it plays a part in a lot of the stuff with what you and Tim do.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like we said before, we look at this stuff holistically, whereas not separate camps, because everybody wants to put everything in boxes. Even I did, before I met Tim. And when I met Tim, he had just kind of crossed that threshold of it not always being a flesh and blood creature. And I had asked him what everybody else that asks us, whatever we take witness reports, what is it? What is this stuff? What, is this a flesh and blood creature? And I even asked him that, and his answer was the same as we give him. Well, I don't know. I'm not an expert. Nobody is, and anybody that says they are, I mean, people gather reports and all that, but how can you be an expert when nobody really has a definitive answer?
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. The way that you can always tell who to avoid is when they say that they're an expert or that they're some kind of when they think they know what's going on, it's just there's not much you can say to them.
Right, and I even address that. I'll do a lot of seminars and demonstrations and teach people some of the woodcraft skills that I have. And one of my inspirations for the life I live, because it is a life, is a gentleman by the name of Horace Kephart. Now, he died in the 1930s. He's a legendary woodsman. He wrote a book called Camping and Woodcraft. And, one of his sayings was, in the school of the woods, there is no graduation day. And that maxim, meaning that when you think you know everything about the woods and the wilderness, that's when Mother Nature shows you otherwise and smacks you down. And that maxim holds true to everything, including the paranormal world. Just when you think you got it figured out, that's when it's going to change, and it's not going to be what you thought it was or what you think it is. And I always, whenever I'm doing teaching, I always tell everybody, don't learn from somebody who says they're an expert, because those people typically think they've seen everything and they know everything and they've done it all. And I always say, I'm not an expert. I'm just a student. And those are the people you should be learning from, or listening to what they maybe have to say, because those people are open-minded, are willing to accept that things can be different. So.
Absolutely. And it kind of, when we talk about this stuff, at what point did you start to really think about either Bigfoot or anything in the paranormal not being how it is traditionally portrayed? I mean, at what point did you start to really think like, okay, well, maybe there's a an incorporeal or maybe spiritual aspect to the Bigfoot phenomena, for example?
Well, see, there you are putting it in a box. It could be something that could manifest physically also.
Well, yeah, right? what I mean is that
I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
We have such a limited vocabulary when it comes to these things.
I know. There really isn't. There isn't a vocabulary, but no. The first time I was on White Rocks Trail with Tim, and I asked him that question that everybody asks. Like, what is it, by God? And he was just like, think of it also as a poltergeist, Wildenergeist. And that kind of opened up my eyes. And I was kind of like, yeah, I never thought of it that way. And I use that example a lot. I don't remember who coined that phrase first. I don't know if it was Soraya or Josh or Tim himself.
I always thought
But
it was Josh, but I've learned now that it may have been Soraya. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Personally, I don't know. But it's very telling. And it's when he said that to me, I was like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. Because traditionally you want to put it in a box. UFOs are aliens and ghosts are ghosts, and Bigfoot is a magic monkey in the woods. And I, I that opened my eyes. That was the first time that opened my eyes. I kind of realized maybe I'm looking at this from the wrong perspective. Maybe I need to start, thinking a little more differently. And that started my journey. And all the experiences I've had also have added to that. I have seen, by doing this, I've seen my first UFO, which was crazy. The lights in the woods, other experiences that are traditional ghosts, traditional ghost phenomenon. I've had rocks bounce off me. I've had boulders thrown at me. I mean, I've had a lot. And just in this last, 3 to 4 years, and it really opens up your eyes and makes you realize that there's more out there, and that maybe there's more going on to this than just, ghosts and Bigfoot and, aliens. It definitely, we start looking at it holistically, and you kind of think that this stuff's interconnected, and you really pay attention to it and don't weird wash things, to use a term that Tim uses. You really start to notice more and starts to expand. I don't want to say understanding, but how you see this world, if it makes any sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've always wanted to ask you is that I know that one of your biggest hobbies and a lifelong hobby for you is the woodsman thing and being out in the woods. And I'm curious, as you've been doing the stuff with Tim, have you noticed any of that stuff bleeding into the wilderness exploration that you do?
As in, like, do I notice things now more when I'm out on myself, or
Yeah, but also, have you ever been out with some guys and maybe one of them has an experience that before you went out with Tim you wouldn't know what to say or what to do, but now that you've been out with Tim you're like, oh, you may have seen this, or you may have.
Oh yeah, I see what you're getting at. Well, I would say this, like, the first time I met Tim, I went to Michelle, and I was exploring an area which we all know and love now, but at the time I didn't know that it was going to become an important area. And I was exploring this area looking for new campsites, because I'm always trying to find new places to camp and new places to go. I have a campsite I use all the time in Michelle, but I was looking for another one. And I just was down in this area, and I was hearing, I guess, what you would call rock clacking. And I had a strange feeling that I was being watched, because when I wander, I don't just always stay on the established trails. I'll go off trail looking for camping spots. I always usually take trails that are not normally well traveled. And, because I have the skills and the ability to get into those places and to be comfortable. And I was just like, I was down on this, crossing this creek, and I was working my way up through out of this ravine. I'm like, and I kept hearing what sounded like rock clacking and stuff to me, and I had this feeling of being watched. And this was before I started hanging out with Tim. I was like, man, I just feel weird. And then I just kept telling myself, no, it's from that guy you were hanging out with. This isn't what you're thinking it is. Now you're thinking everything's Bigfoot because you're hanging out with this guy.
Yeah.
I was like, now he made me, it's like this guy made me see that, was telling me things, and now it's affecting me. I'm just like, get yourself together. I wasn't scared, but I was just like, I was noticing things that might have been there before that I didn't notice, or, well, I might have noticed, but I wrote them off. But now I was noticing them and taking note more, and I'm like, that's just from this guy. Just don't let him get in your head. It's funny. And that area turned out to be Harry Springs, believe it or not.
Ah,
So
the
I was
infamous Harry
there.
Springs.
Hmm?
The infamous Harry Springs.
Yeah, the infamous Harry Springs. And I did not realize that later until we had met the gentleman who took us there the first time. And we're driving down the road at night to the parking spot. I'm like, oh my God. And Tim goes, what? I was like, I've been here before. I said, Tim, this is the place that I had all that weird knocking and stuff at the weekend after I met you. And I was like, oh, it's just him getting in my head, So, I have this history with Harry Springs before I even knew it was a thing. So yes, it does affect what I do in a bit. Like it seems to be like, and me and Tim have said this before, it's kind of like the Eye of Sauron effect. Like sometimes we just go hiking just to go hiking. We're not looking for anything crazy to happen. And there's been times, along Muddy Creek Trail and other spots where next thing you know, if there's something there in the area, it's like, oh, you guys notice us, or you guys take notice to the different or the other, and it likes to say hi. So that's happened to me numerous times. There was a time I went camping with my friends, and we try and do a hike every year. It hasn't happened every year, called the Ruck Rabbit Run. Happens in the fall. It's just kind of like this hike we do together. We do a camping trip together, and it's usually we usually hike in 2 to 4 miles, try and see something cool when we're there. It's kind of like the unofficial rules. And it's just my group of guys, that we call the Ruck Rabbit Gang, or part of our little organization, whatever you want to call it, club, organization. We don't have a defining definition for it. And the last one we were at, and we went up and over this mountain, and we were dropping down into this valley. And I had scouted this trail ahead of time, and the camping spot I had picked was further down. Well, we have some older gentlemen, in our group. My friend Tom just turned 67. So we have some guys that are older, and they still carry, 50, 60-pound packs up a mountain, And this particular day, it was a little steep, and it got warmer than what we thought. And we dropped into this. It was like a bowl. So as you came down off the mountain, the trail kind of levels out, and then it starts following this creek. And it was like a bowl down in there in this depression. And the guys were like, "Oh, this looks like a good spot for a camping, to camp. Let's just stay here. This will be good." There was water, there was wood. And I was like, "Well, the spot I picked was still a little further down." They're like, "No, Chad, I think we're good here." And I looked, and there was a Mylar balloon there. And right away, for those who have listened to Strange Familiars, the Mylar balloon is one of the things, it could be just a Mylar balloon that floated in there, but it's still one of those things that we kind of take as a signpost for us to take notice. Because in all of our experiences, one of them being Toad Road, we saw a Mylar balloon. Next thing you know, we're finding pig skulls coming out of the ground. So, it's just one of them things that just kind of, is like a signpost saying, "Hey, take notice here. Let's just kind of, pay attention more if you weren't already." And of course, I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to camp here. This is not a good place. So I said to them, I said, "Guys, let's just kind of go." And they were pretty adamant. I said, "All right, we'll camp here." And then get my tent set up and get stuff. It was just starting to get into nightfall. And as the sun was going down, we were hearing all kinds of wildlife. I heard turkeys calling like like I said, it was like a bowl. So the trail kind of went up over a little bit of a rise. I heard turkeys calling on the other side of the rise. And I have a friend of mine who's from Virginia. He's got a very deep Southern accent. His name's Steve. And, he talks just like this. And whenever I use that accent, I'm not mocking him. It's actually respectful.
Oh yeah,
He
no,
actually
of
laughs.
course. Yeah.
He
I do
thinks
the
it's
same
funny when I.
I do the same thing
Huh?
with I do the same thing with Luke cuz he's got that signature British accent. So, yeah.
Right, right. So we're there, and it was just starting to get nightfall. We heard the turkeys and other animals. Well, next thing you know, I hear this owl call, and it starts out as a barred owl. That who cooks for you? It's how a barred owl has that whoo hoo hoo hoo. That typical sound. It started out that whoo hoo hoo, and then all of a sudden it turned into a fox scream, and that was bizarre. I mean, it came from the same source. I don't know. Did a barred owl kill a fox? I don't know. But I looked at Steve, and I'm like, oh man. And he goes, my gosh. He goes, whatever that was, it couldn't decide if it wanted to be an owl or a fox. So right away, I'm just like, here we go, And I ended up running the recorder all night, and I forget how many hours of footage I caught. I went through some of it, but it was hard to pull the calls and whatever was out, because some of the guys are epic snorers. So I don't think I got anything really of worth putting on a podcast, which that happens. Sometimes we do hear noises and all that, and it doesn't translate very well into actual footage that we can put on the podcast. And I did hear some odd sounds on the recording and so on and so forth, and it was just, it wasn't a bad night, but I didn't sleep good that night. So, but that's just one of many things that have happened, that have translated into my lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see, how those two things could collide. One thing that I've always wanted to ask you is, you've had your run-ins with Bigfoot-like activity and ghost-like activity. But what about some of the other kind of creatures that people experience, like Dogman, for example? I know that Tim hates that term, but it's so baked into my vocabulary. That's just what I call them.
Like what? Have I seen Dogman?
No, I mean that, or if you've ever experienced anything where it felt more, I guess, like how people would describe a werewolf or a Dogman activity to be like.
I would say the closest thing I've had was when we were at Pandemonium, the Pandemonium howls that you can hear on the recording. I'm not saying they're Dogman. That's not what I'm saying. But that, I guess you could say, would, because they don't sound like anything normal. They don't sound like a wolf or a coyote. Anything else, I guess we could say, like in the show, in the one spot where I camp, I saw shadows that were dog looking.
Really?
As the sun was going down, when I had that one episode where me and Tom were camping, I saw some shadows moving, just out as the sun was going down. But I wasn't too sure if they were coyote, because coyotes can be pretty quick. These were bigger. I don't know if you've ever seen coyotes in the wild.
Yeah, I
Eastern
have.
coyotes. I've been followed by them. They'll follow you along the trail, looking for food, and I've done a lot of out and back, where you go out to one point and you come back the same way, and I'm surprised coyotes along there. But the only thing I could say that would be close was in Michaud, when we were camping that one night, me and Tom. It was just us two in the one hollow that I camp in all the time. And as the sun, and that place is weird. I've had a lot of stuff happen there. I just haven't gotten Tim into there yet, because it's a little more isolated. It's a little harder to get into. And to really experience it, you almost got to do an overnight there. And the sun was going down, and I know that place so well that I can tell time depending on the season by the birds calls and stuff. One of the few places I've actually heard whippoorwills. I don't know if you've ever heard whippoorwills,
I don't think
but
so.
they're very unholy sounding, and they'll go all night long. And it's just, the place has a feel of its own, and I want to say there is something there. There's rules there that I follow when I'm in there, and this is where this kind of goes into your question you had before. Does anything bleed over into my lifestyle? And this place for sure. So, I go to the bathroom in certain places. I have certain things I do, and so on and so forth. There's just rules, and it just kind of, whatever's there, me and the other that's there have kind of established, I don't want to say a bond, but a mutual respect. Like I'm okay to be, it's its place, but I'm okay to be there as long as certain things are met. And but anyways, as the sun was going down, I saw what looked like a dog-like shadow move across the one trail. Now, I didn't say anything to my friend Tom at the time because he's had some bad run-ins at times on the AT way before I met him years ago, and I didn't want to alert him because I didn't, it wasn't worth alerting him. I mean, I took notice of it and I was paying more attention, but it was just more like kind of like noting it. So in case it did get a little more squirrely, so to speak. And, he's come to accept that because we've done a lot of solo, camping together, just me and him. And compared to the rest of my friends, he's come to accept more of the weirdness that follows me, if that makes any sense. So that's about it, really, as far as like Dogman encounters. I've never seen a Dogman. I've never felt, people have felt overwhelming fear. I've never felt that. I felt like, I would say the closest I felt to overwhelming fear was at White Rocks when I heard that howl growl, the Michelle noise, whatever you want to call it. And it was deafening and shook the woods. And when I tried to go forward that second time, and I had this feeling like if I kept going, I was going to get messed up. But that wasn't mostly fear. That was just mostly like, you need to go.
Mm-hmm. That's well, I mean,
I've
definitely felt that. I felt that at Gazoo's. That was probably one of my most intense and in my face experiences, even though I didn't see anything, like nothing. Yeah, I mean, I heard some stuff, but I definitely got that feeling like if I kept going, something I was gonna see something or experience something I wasn't ready for. But one of my favorite episodes, and this is one that I come back to quite often, especially when I'm driving up to PA to see Tim or just hike by myself, is the Michaud episodes. And I'm curious how that started. The guest that you were with, how did you guys meet him? Or did he just email and want to be on the show? Or?
Which one? There's been multiples.
The Haunted Forest episodes where you and Tim were out with this witness, and Tim got his pack pulled, and you guys got both charged.
Harry Springs? Yeah, I think he contacted us, honestly, and wanted to tell us his story. And typical of what we do is, we like to go where people have experienced it, not necessarily expecting to experience what they experienced. We just like to be there where it happened to them. It lends weight to it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we went there, once we dropped into the hollow, because you're literally driving along the ridge, the plateau kind of region of Michaud. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but then you go down the mountain and you're dropping into Harry Springs Hollow. And that's when I realized, we were actually seeing crap as we were driving down. I was seeing lights in the woods as we're going down into it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I realized where, and I don't think that ever made it into the episode. Or we might have remarked on it, but it might have been just something small. But we were like, oh crap, there's that light. We were seeing a light as we're going down. And then when I passed the one parking area, I realized where we were going. I said, Tim, I said, I've had experiences here before. And, like I've told you already, with the second weekend after I met Tim, I said, I've been here before. I said, this place was kind of active then. I think we're in for a crazy night. And, I ended up getting charged by something. Tim had his pack pulled. And Harry Springs has just been, it's a monster from here forth, from then on. I mean, I even had my knife taken from me, or I lost it, one of the two, but either way, it was given back to me.
Yeah.
I asked for it in return, and that was definitely a tap on your shoulder moment that, this stuff is not, that's real.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Choose to believe it or not. And everybody reaches that point where they realize, it's not just in my head,
Well, I think, that's one of the big things that magic and the occult have in common. I mean, there's a lot of things that magic has in common with the paranormal, but the two things that stand out for me is that this stuff exists and it works regardless of whether you believe in it or not. You don't have to believe in it. You're going to experience it because it's sort of an objective reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you still have to pay attention. And I think this stuff always happens more so than what we realize. And you have these people that are like, well, I've never seen Bigfoot. We got off topic. We'll get back. I'll steer us back to your original question. I kind of got us off topic off of your question. But this stuff happens more than we realize. And I think you get these people who are like, I've never seen Bigfoot. I've never had anything happen, and blah, 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 blah. I do think there are some people who are just basically null. Like they don't, for some reason, their brains it doesn't compute. There are people that are like that. And I'm not saying I'm special or anybody else is special. I think a lot of people are capable of experiencing this, but I think a lot of it is just people either don't want to experience it. There's some that can't, and I think those are more rare than people that can. And then there's people who just, they write it off. I mean, it's not like I go out in the woods and I'm like, every light in the woods is something special. Or every time I'm out, I just think it's just a matter of a certain mindset of like, hey, let's just kind of be more open, be more, pay attention to what's going on around you. I think people have other senses other than their five senses. More so than people realize, and just kind of pay attention to that, your gut feelings, your gut instincts. And the training I have kind of helps with that because I look at the woods differently, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
I'm more open. I always say a good woodsman is watchful, not paranoid. You're not out there, afraid of every little noise, but you pay attention, you're watchful, and you just, you make note of things. Even small things can be something big. And I think that's what a lot of people have lost that. We're so used to our modern world of, indicator lights on cars telling you which way to go. And, now they want to have self-driving cars. We're losing the ability to take care of ourselves. And I think that's why a lot of people are starting to like move towards these self-reliance movements and
absolutely
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
People are losing that ability to take care. We're so insulated from the world. And I'm not talking just the natural world, just the world in general, what the world really is, that we're losing that connection. And some people can't make that connection. They're so in this artificial environment, they can't get back to, or if they experience something that's beyond what the artificial environment is, they either just write it off or it really affects them in a certain way.
Right. And that kind of brings up an interesting point because I think the thing that we have to look at in regards to that is the folklore that I know that Tim is a big fan of and that I'm a big fan of. the times that they were written in. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have computers. They didn't have cars.
No.
They were without. They didn't have a choice. They had to experience reality, every day, every minute of every day. And in our modern times, because we don't have to do that, we can, if you really wanted to, I don't know why you would, but if you really wanted to, you could stay in your house 24 hours a day and have everything you need and never have to leave the house unless there was a medical emergency.
Exactly.
But I think that when you look at those times when when you had to interact with the world just to survive, people were seeing things and they were experiencing things. And now we say that they're fairy tales, that they're folklore, and we mean that in like a fake way, like, oh, that didn't really happen. That was just ways to pass the time. And I don't think that at all. I think those people were experiencing a very fundamental aspect of reality that as we've gotten more advanced and more removed from nature, that we can kind of opt out of in a way. But they didn't have that. And so that's why that's why they were seeing and experiencing everything that they wrote about.
I mean, everybody lived back then closer to the land, even the farmers. I mean, you lived according to, you had a bad harvest or you had some bad weather, things could turn bad.
Absolutely.
And
we're not even talking that far back. I mean, No,
not even, I mean, things can turn bad now. If we have a bad harvest, here in the United States, it could get bad. So we're really not as far removed as we like to think we are, to be honest. But back then, people lived more closer to the land. You lived seasonally. You ate berry. The wild berries were there at certain times. It's just like I do foraging classes, and some of the things that I know, it's so crazy how it works. But some of the berries here in South Central Pennsylvania, they have their certain seasons, and if you know which berries come in at certain times, they don't overlap. They overlap a little bit, but they don't. Like each berry kind of comes in at its own time, and it's funny how that works. That there's food available if you know what to look for, even during the fall. There's berries and food that keeps even during the wintertime, that comes out late fall, and it will, it might not be the best, but you can still consume it in the wintertime if you need it to. It's there for the birds and so on and so forth. But folklore is really just a way, everybody, like you said, says, oh, it's just fairy tales, but it's also knowledge. That's how they, that was their computers. That's how they processed and carried over knowledge to the generation, after the generation, and from generation to generation. That's how they stored knowledge. It's easier, like in school when you were learning things, they say, oh, make a song out of it, to learn, ABCs, or something like that. When you're a little kid, they're like, make a song out of it and you remember it better. And folklore is like that too. If you make a story out of it, you'll remember why. I mean, even if you look at nursery rhymes, they have certain meanings. If you go back, the traditional nursery rhymes even have meanings and knowledge to them. And so folklore is very important. It's very important. I never, I always listen to the folklore rules, on things, because more often than not, they're true. And we look back at our ancestors and we're like, oh, they were dumb, and they didn't have what we have, and, they weren't as smart as us. And honestly, that's bullcrap, because they were every bit as smart as us. I mean, we still have the same brain they did. We might have more higher technology, but that doesn't mean that they weren't smart. There's things that they have, like actually true Damascus steel. We don't know what it really was like. I mean, we have a means of, basically saying it is Damascus, but we just can't quite get the nuances that they had of that steel. Concrete. The Romans had concrete, and the Romans' buildings are still standing where some of ours fall down. So our concrete is still not as good as theirs. And when Rome fell, we lost the secret of concrete for over 1,000 years. So you can't say that the people back then were not intelligent, were not smart. They just had a different technology level, and that doesn't mean that they were nowhere near as smart as us.
And you can, if you take a computer engineer, as smart, as intelligent as they are, and you plopped them even in woods like Michaud and asked them to survive for a weekend,
they're done.
Exactly.
They're done. So it's just different types of knowledge is really what it comes down to. Knowledge is knowledge.
Right. Exactly. And I think it's important to be, that's one thing that I think that the ancients and our forebears had over us, is that they were knowledgeable in many different areas of life. They were well-rounded as far as what they knew. And now we don't really do that. We're more about, you learn one thing and you get really good at that one thing, but everything else kind of falls by the wayside. And I think that leaves a big opportunity for you to get hurt or just not get hurt, but you lack something when you don't take knowledge from everywhere you can.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do. I try and learn something new every day, even if it's something small. So I always call myself an eternal student. I mean, a lot of the skills that I have, excuse me, a lot of skills I have are actually old knowledge, and I even say that our ancestors had. We're like, oh, I'm going to go build a fire with my Bic lighter. Well, that's just your fire starter. There's still certain things you have to do to be able to properly build a fire.
Right. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who can start a fire, but can they maintain it?
Exactly. Or even get it started. I mean, I've seen people who they have a Bic lighter and they're like, well, I can start a fire with this. Well, okay. Well, let's see you do it in wet weather, or in the rain, or so on and so forth. Or, what if everything you have is like big, if you have logs around you, without the ability or the knowledge to process the wood down and, build up from that, you can't really, you can have a Bic lighter all you want all day long. It's still a tool that you have to know how to use. I was practicing one time, flint and steel, and I had this guy come up to me and he's like, that's a waste of time. I'm like, why? He goes, well, I just take diesel fuel with me and I dump it on and I said, well, first off, diesel doesn't really fire with a spark, it requires high compression. And second off, I'm not lugging gasoline or diesel fuel 5 miles with me into the woods. If that makes,
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to carry a can of diesel fuel. So, that's great and all, but, you can't always have gasoline available to start a fire. So, but yeah, having tools and having the knowledge to use them are two different complete things. Absolutely. So, but to steer you back onto where we were before we went off on this tangent. So you had asked me, like, what was the impetus for the Michaud? Like, what started that?
Yeah, kind of, just talking, where did that start and how fruitful that area has been for you guys. I mean, those are some of the best episodes and some of the craziest things that you've had. Obviously there's Pandemonium and Gazoos, but Michaud just seems to be the place that keeps on giving as far as evidence and audio and things like that.
I think Tim was in that area before me. Before he met me, you had the Michaud, Growl, the Pond Bank episodes, which are located on the edge of Michaud. Michaud State Forest is actually part of a larger area called the South Mountains. So the South Mountains are part of the Appalachian Mountains. They're a small spur that kind of goes up from the Potomac River up to Maryland, then arcs up into PA, and then ends at the northernmost point of York County. So White Rock Trail, which is where I've had I don't want to say my first experience, but my kind of like what drifted me into this world, was at the northernmost tip of the South Mountains. And then as you head down the South Mountains, you enter into Michoud State Forest. So it's more of Michoud State Forest itself is part of a larger area. And there's all kinds of folklore and stories about that are in those mountains, in that whole area, all the way from the northern part where White Rocks, all the way down through into Maryland into the Catoctin Mountains, which are part of the South Mountains, where you have the Dueo and the Snallygaster legends and all kinds of other stuff, and so it has a history, even before we, tapped into it, of just bizarro things happening. Michoud has historically been, we seem to find that stuff happens where man has disturbed the ground. The Michoud State Forest area near Gettysburg has a history of, even before Europeans came to the continent, of the ground being dug into. The indigenous tribes, actually quarried rock out of there. We don't have flint in this area to make weapons and tools out of, so they used a mineral called rhyolite, and they actually quarried that out of the Michoud area. You can actually still see those ancient quarries there now. And then, of course, later on, the iron industry came in there, and so far my research has popped up at least 8 to 7 iron furnaces just in the Michoud Forest area and around.
Wow.
3 of them are still standing. I found remnants. I'm still trying to find remnants of other ones. I think I found remnants of another one, but there are actually 3 that you can actually still see. And there's our Big Pond Furnace, which is near Harry Springs, Pine Grove Furnace, which is in Pine Grove State Park, and the Caledonia Furnace, which is actually in Caledonia State Forest. So, and like I said, I found actual written reports and pictures of 8 to 7 just in that area, and I guarantee you there's more. So it's got a lot going for it. I mean, there was even legends. I think I found an old map of a silver mine in there, so I want to locate that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it just has a very rich history of strangeness, and it has a lot of sightings of Dogman and, back to where you were before, and Bigfoot, and, just has a lot of really cool old legends. So I think the area has always been like that. And not to mention the hollow names. I mean, you have Dead Woman's Hollow, you have Dark Hollow, you have Haunted Hollow, you have Devil Alex Hollow, which, Harry Springs, which is not Harry, but Hairy. So how do you explain those names?
Right. Yeah, so, absolutely. I mean,
and go ahead.
Well, I was just going to, I don't know if I had ever told you my experience in Michoud.
No, you haven't.
Oh, okay. So this would be the spring of 2020. This was right before, this was around the time that COVID had started, and we knew what was going on, but it hadn't really affected anything quite yet. And a buddy and I decided we had gone hiking, or we had gone camping in Pennsylvania the spring before, but this time we were going to do it again. And we went up to a place that I really enjoy called Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, which is a little town. It's kind of like, I think they call it the Europe of Pennsylvania, or the Europe of East Coast, something like that. Very nice, pretty town, and we camped up in those woods.
The Poconos area.
Yeah. We camped up in those woods one night, and nothing really happened. So on our way back home to Maryland, I said, hey, we're here one more day. Why don't we camp out in Michoud? And my original intent was Tim had actually sent me the coordinates to where that guest had some experiences, and so we were going to camp there. But it's interesting how this stuff happens. My car was basically running out of gas by the time we got to Michoud, and it was at the the point of no return, where if we had like turned around to go get gas, we were going to run out of gas on the way to get gas. So we were like, all right, you know what? We'll just deal with this in the morning. Let's park as soon as we can and just hike wherever we park. And so we park the car and we find this little like off, very neglected game trail. And we camp out for the night. And, my buddy, he's a big skeptic, so he wasn't really expecting anything. And I had known about Michaud for quite a while now, and so I was up all night just kind of waiting for something to happen. And we heard some weird noises, specifically one, like a howl that just kind of, I'm not going to do it, but it sounded like someone saying, like, wahoo! And it didn't sound like a person. I mean, it really sounded something different. And of course, he heard it, and he was like, oh, well, that's probably just drunk people. And I can't say it wasn't drunk people, but it sounded like a lot of the things I had heard on Bigfoot recordings. And so it wasn't much, but it definitely confirmed to me that there was a lot there. I had actually gone hiking at Harry Springs, or a trail a couple miles away from Harry Springs, back in June or July. And I got in and I walked probably for 30 minutes, and I kind of had this feeling like I wasn't prepared for this, because there were a lot of trails going off the main trail, and it just felt really big. And I just was like, I need to come back here. Like, I need to do some more research on this trail and see what's actually here. And I didn't have any water with me, and I just I didn't feel like I was prepared. But Michaud definitely feels like there's stuff there, and I'm really keen to investigate it with you and Tim and camp out there and things like that.
Yeah, it's definitely its own world. I mean, it's got some topography that makes it unique. There's some plants and trees that are found there that shouldn't be this far south. It should be more up north. So because of the way it is, it's different animal is the best way to describe it. I mean, there was a time, it is the first state forest in PA. It was created by Rothrock. And he created the whole state forest system in PA. And at one time, they call it, Michaud looked like a desert. So if you can imagine just like all the trees cut down, forest fires constantly, because there was, all the underbrush and stuff laying down, because the iron industry really, really, really raped the land and altered it. I mean, there's slag everywhere to this day. I mean, I don't know if you ever seen any of the slag in Michaud.
Not in person, but I have seen pictures of it.
You probably have seen it and didn't even realize what it was. I mean, wherever the iron furnace were, they dumped slag everywhere. And it's just its own animal. And, it's crazy that you see it now and you don't realize, that you think these trees have been there forever, but most of that forest is second or third growth. They're currently logging out some of it now, bits and pieces of it, and they're doing controlled burns. So if somebody's walking around, all of a sudden the woods is like gone. That's why.
Okay.
But they do it conservationally. I mean, they're not in there just like destroying the whole woods, but you do have to keep stuff cleaned out and somewhat taken care of, if you don't do controlled burns. I mean, Harry Springs, I don't know if you were there, but if you noticed, they actually had a controlled burn there probably 3 years ago, and you can still see the remnants of it.
Yeah, you definitely can.
Trees. And that's done so you don't have these uncontrolled forest fires.
Right. I mean, I know that controlled burns are actually, required to maintain the land. Yeah. They're good for the woods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it has a history of human activity changing it. There's been a lot of bad things that have happened there, whether that amounts to anything. I think there was the Appalachian Trail goes through there, so thousands of people go through there, hundreds every year, and don't even realize it. They travel the actual halfway point for the Appalachian Trail's there.
Okay, and, I didn't know that.
A lot of people go through there. You have Camp Michaud, which was a prisoner of war camp from World War II. It was also like a conservation corps camp. Conservation Corps are the organization that was started by Theodore Roosevelt during the 1930s. So there's a ton of history there. I mean, just so much. And a lot of people don't realize it when they're going through there. They're like, oh, this is just pretty woods. It's like, no, there's more here than you realize if you go through and just look back on it. So, and I'm not saying every area doesn't have that, but it's just, I don't know. There's something about it. It's a magical place.
It really
is beautiful, but it can also be menacing too if you're not prepared for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been wondering if you guys have either gone or spent any time in the Allegheny Forest or have any plans to, because I know that's that takes up a pretty large area in northern Pennsylvania as far as woods go.
I've been there once. I went camping with an individual or individuals, and not my normal group of guys. And it wasn't very good, not because of anything paranormal. So I myself have been there, and I haven't really delved into. I'm sure we'll get there eventually. We have a lot of projects coming up. We're looking for the next one. We have one in the works that might, depending on which way it goes or where we go, might be like kind of the next bridge project. But that's actually a little more local. So we don't have to travel as far, but we are looking at other areas in Pennsylvania to go to. And that just depends on time constraints,
So, yeah, of course.
I think that's one place I myself want to explore more, just even on my own. When I have more time. As far as like getting Tim up there, that just all depends on time constraints and so on and so forth. But no, I've heard nothing but good things about that, if you can call it good things, as far as like paranormal activity and all that up there. I've heard a lot, and I just think with any large section of woods, you're going to have that, especially if you have one like that in Michaud, where a lot of people visit, and that's a national forest. And I don't know if anybody knows, but if you Google map, or if you just Google Bigfoot sightings in PA, there's literally a map or like an app that will pop up, and it will literally superimpose itself on your Google Maps app.
Yeah, I've done that.
All the Bigfoot sightings and experiences that whoever is doing this, and they're doing a great job, whoever that person is.
Yeah, they are, because they're even including reports and experiences that the BFRO will not put in.
Mm-hmm. They even have ones from Tim and I.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, like from Tim's books are even in there from the 1920s.
Nice.
So whoever does that is doing an excellent job. Kudos to them. Thumbs up. And you can just see like a lot of main forests, state game lands and all that. It's just all over the place. So honestly, you don't have to travel too far, But no, I do want to get into the Allegheny Forest, even just on a personal level, because I'd like to see more of it. It's just, you're talking 4 hours away. It's a lot of, statistical stuff, a lot of planning has to go into that. So once we get more time and all that, and we can make that happen. But when that's going to happen, I don't know. Like I said, we have some things planned right now. We have probably 3 or 4 projects on the back burner right now that are just, it's just a matter of when we get to them, and whichever one pans out. And we always are constantly having things pop up, like Gazoo's Woods. That was just like a fluke.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Gazoos, because I wanted to ask you, going from Michaud and how big of an area that is, when Tim told you about Gazoos and you got there, what was your reaction like, just given how unbelievably sparse this area is?
no, really not that bad. I mean, I was just like, I wasn't disappointed if that's what you're asking me, because
Oh
at
no,
that
I'm just
point,
because when I remember the first time I went there, it was after hearing Tim's first mention of it, and I went there and I
hmm
was expecting not Michaud, but a lot more trees than are actually there. I was very surprised that he had the experience he had in those woods, and that
to to be honest, at this point, I'm not surprised that small areas like that have a
Oh
lot.
yeah, me neither. At this point, after what
And
I've yeah.
and I think a lot of that, if it would have been me from the get go at the beginning, I would have been like, well, this is kind of tame woods. This stuff's happening here. I mean, the first time there was during the day. When we had the first and we had that kind of, when we're walking on the trail, he's telling me about, when he actually caught the picture of whatever it was. And when you get on that trail, it is, you're in the woods. It's not deep woods, but, it still has a certain feel to it. And, finding the stuff in the cemetery that we found, definitely was like, kind of like, okay, there's something going on here, but is it man-made, or is somebody affecting it, so on and so forth. But that night, the first time we went there at night, and we had that crazy night where, I'm flashing the flashlight and literally hearing footsteps not even 3 feet in front of me, and my flashlight's penetrating 60 to 100 feet through the woods, and I see nothing. And I know it's right there in front of me. I mean, I can hear it, I can feel it, but I don't see it. That's bizarro. When that would have been bizarro anywhere. But the fact, that we were having all this happen in this, pretty open woods, you would expect it more of a show versus there.
Yeah,
So, did that answer
absolutely.
your question?
Yeah, it did. It's just
hmm
Gazoo's is it is really an anomaly, and it accentuates Tim's point so much about the the more how much more to the Bigfoot phenomena there really is,
hmm
because you've had experiences there, I've had experiences there, and obviously we don't say the name just because it is private land. But if anyone does know what it is or stumbles across it, I think they'd be very surprised. Just
Yeah,
given
I
how.
mean, even Site Seven's like that.
Oh yeah.
You don't, Site Seven, you don't expect it to be, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot there, but it's where it's located. It's like there's houses and stuff around it, and it's not in the middle of nowhere. And it's just crazy that you have the amount of stuff that goes on there. The bridge, and Gettysburg. Now everybody can say, well, it's because of Gettysburg, but the phenomenon we have there isn't just strictly ghost type phenomenon. And there was more there than just ghosts. You know, I mean, how you explain the calls and all that, and there's more there than just like ghost things. And the problem with Gettysburg, everybody seems to want to tie it all to the Civil War, and it's like, yeah, that was a major event, but there are people living before and after the Civil War
That we're reporting things,
that had,
yeah.
yeah, that were recording things before then. So it's like, in Gettysburg, it's all, well, it's because of the soldiers. No, Sachs Bridge, you look like, well, there were 3 soldiers handed here. Well, I've talked to numerous historians who say that that's bunk. They literally say there is no historical mention of that. Somebody would have mentioned that historically
Yeah.
about the 3 hanged soldiers. I mean, that would have made the paper, or somebody would have mentioned that. And like we said before, you have guns everywhere. So they're more apt to just shoot you, especially if you're retreating. You're moving. You're not standing around, waiting. You're not going to stand around and hang somebody and make a big show of it when you have your enemy coming after you.
Right. Yeah.
So that doesn't make any statistical sense. But no, a lot of these places, prove that you don't have to be in the middle of nowhere to have this phenomenon. Just the fact that we're in Pennsylvania and we're not in the traditional Bigfoot area of the Pacific Northwest. That in itself is an anomaly. And there's sightings all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, you know, when I was a kid growing up, Bigfoot was something in the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't here in PA. You know, and honestly, Bigfoot wasn't even on my radar until, you know, I had what happened to me at White Rocks. You know, I didn't think of Bigfoot being in Pennsylvania. I was just like, you know, I thought of other traditional, you know, cryptid type creatures around here, but not of the Bigfoot. You know, it wasn't until, you know, I had that happen and I started doing the research and I found, you know, that the other things that happened in that area that other people experienced. I'm like, oh, this is a thing. So, you know, until the typical person that I met that lives in this area, until they had something happen themselves and you say, you know, Bigfoot's a thing, and they're like, what are you talking about? That's out in California and the Pacific Northwest. It's like, no, dude, there's more to it than you realize. And then they really realize, and I think we're kind of in this Renaissance period now where people are starting to think or understand that this is a much wider phenomenon than just in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I mean there's sightings in every state at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the how many in each state varies obviously, but there is at least one sighting in every state. And I can't verify this, but I've heard that there have been sightings in Hawaii. And obviously, as Tim has noted before, that the wild man phenomena exists across the world and including Europe. And obviously they contextualize it differently than we do. I don't know if they actually call it Bigfoot, but there have been people who've said that there are Bigfoot or Sasquatch-like creatures in mainland Europe and in England.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think it's the Wilderman. The Wodeman, I could be wrong. I know Woden is Odin's old name.
Right.
But Merlin was a wild man.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, the Victorians had a belief that if you went into the woods and you lived wildly out in the woods, like you would grow hair from all over your body. You would actually grow, you know, your hair would grow everywhere. You'd get claws and you would look like a wild man.
Yeah, that's what happened to me.
I have a story that I was talking to. Sorry, I heard something. An old trapper, and I was at one of the bushcraft or wildcraft gatherings, and I was talking to a gentleman from North Carolina, and I asked him, you know, what he thought, and he said, well, you know, back in the 1800s, and this makes total sense. You know, when the animals started to be trapped out, you know, because you'd have these trappers go into the wild and they would trap all the animals. And, you know, the land became more settled. You had these old trappers that they were so used to living out in the middle of nowhere, not around people, they couldn't adjust to civilization anymore, and they would come into town every once in a while to get supplies or pass through. Now these aren't, I guess you could say they're hermits, but they were the typical mountain man, and they would come in and, you know, they'd have, you know, they'd be dressed in furs and they'd have, you know, the wild bushy beard and all that, and, you know, they were at, you know, and people would say, well, it's Bigfoot when you know, they would call it a wild man when it actually was just some trapper coming back in from being out there for God knows how long, for years.
Wow.
And,
okay.
You know, and I think that attributes to some of the sightings where, like, if you look at some of the old accounts of Bigfoot having an old rusty gun or wearing tattered clothes, it might have actually been some of these gentlemen who were out there and they came back into civilization because, you know, there was nothing left out there. And, you know, people were like, they thought it was, you know, a wild man. They thought it was something other, not human anymore. And that's what the Victorians thought. You would go out and you'd be out there in the wilderness and you would no longer be human anymore. So now here's a kicker. Now maybe those people, the people that grew the hair and were living out there, were actually more human than the people that were living in the artificial.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely think
civilization. So that's all a matter of perspective.
Absolutely. I know we're coming down to the wire here, but do you want to give a little, backstory to Ruck Rabbit Outdoors and the name and how that all started?
Mm, mm. So, Ruck Rabbit Outdoors basically just started as a group of people, and it still really is a group of friends who are into the style of living that we live, living with the land, because a true woodsman lives with the land, not off of it. Because you always have people who are like, well, I'm going to live off the land. You live with the land because you can't really live off of it because it will smack you down. So you live with whatever it gives you. But, a bunch of people who enjoy being out in the wilderness, enjoyed camping, being out there practicing the skills that we have. Each one of us is more knowledgeable in certain aspects of this life than others. Like, I'm not the best at knots. I have a friend of mine who's like, he knows every knot for every occasion. He can tell you 20 knots to do one thing. I find one, and that's the one I use, because for one thing, my brain can't remember knots, but I'm really good at starting fires. I'm also good with making traps and stuff like that, and axe work. I'm good with axes. So we each have our own skill sets that we're better at than others. But we're all generalized pretty good woodsmen. So anyways, I came out with this camp out, and I said, hey guys, let's do this camp out. And I was trying to just like come up with a name for it. And if you look up bushcraft, which is the modern term, the old term is for the United States is either woodcraft or woods lore. Problem is now if you say woodcraft, everybody thinks you make furniture. Okay. So, but the old term is either campcraft, woodcraft, or woods lore. Bushcraft is more of a European, Australian, or Canadian term, but it's all the same thing. It's all about wilderness skills, which is what I like to call it. So if you look that up, you'll inevitably see this image of a rabbit smoking a pipe. And what that is an old East Coast indigenous people's legend. Traditionally, rabbit is the trickster figure for the East Coast. When you think of trickster gods or trickster figures for Native American indigenous peoples, everybody thinks of coyote. Well, coyote didn't exist on the East Coast back then. Coyote coming here now is actually a new creature. We're actually seeing the evolution of a totally new animal, somewhere between a wolf and a coyote. Coyote has only been here for 300 years, roughly, on the East Coast. But traditionally, for the indigenous peoples, rabbit was the trickster figure. So how the legend goes, or the myth, whatever you want to call it, you see rabbit smoking a pipe, and how it goes is, why does rabbit have time to smoke his pipe when fox, bobcat, bear, wolf, and all the other predators are hunting him? And so that's the question. And the answer is, it's because he's confident in his abilities to take care of himself. Rabbit was able to trick his enemies. He had the ability to take care of himself, so he didn't live in fear. So because how that falls into with the wilderness skills is, because I have the skills I have and the knowledge I have, I can go into the forest at night, and in different climates, I've been out in winter camping in 10 degrees or lower, in the rain, and all kinds of weather. I can go out in all of these, at least on the East Coast, the northeast woodlands, which is that's my environment. With my knowledge, I can make myself comfortable and actually thrive out there. I'm not afraid because I'm confident in my abilities. Not cocky, but confident, because cockiness will get you killed. So anyways, so you see that image of the rabbit, and I was always into collecting backpacks, and I like old gear. I like antique camping gear of all different sorts, even down to lanterns. I have some really cool 100-plus-year-old gear that I actually take out into the woods with me and use. And anyways, I like collecting backpacks, and I like that rabbit imagery, but I didn't want to use the smoking pipe motif because everybody uses that. And I was like, oh, ruck rabbit. Ruck is a military or another term for a backpack. So it just kind of, rolls off the tongue. It really rhymes. Ruck rabbit outdoors. So that kind of became the name. So originally I was just called the camp out that we went on, the Ruck Rabbit Run, which, really flows. And it was 4 of us that went on that original camping trip. And we had some real ordeals as far as like weather and terrain. Ended up becoming harder than we thought it was going to be, but we persevered. We did our camp trip and we came back. And I asked my friend Tom, I said, did you have fun? He goes, yep, any trip you come back from that you're not mangled or killed is a good one. So we did suffer a little bit, but we still smiled and enjoyed it. And it solidified that friendship. And we all kind of like had the same interest as far as vintage gear and what we do. And eventually I was collecting wool because I really like wool clothing. It's actually a tradition, when everybody thinks of Woolrich, that was actually a Pennsylvania company. I'm very proud of my state. And, when everybody thinks of the Pennsylvania tuxedo, which is the Woolrich hunting suit with the black and red plaid, I'll actually wear that in the woods in the wintertime.
Very cool.
Keeps you warm.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Cool. Yeah. If you don't believe me, go to my Instagram page. You'll see me. And I wanted cheap wool because wool clothing is very expensive. So I got really good at, finding wool clothing at a good price. And next thing you know, I have this closet full of wool stuff, and it came to be more than I could wear. And I'm like, well, I need to get rid of this. And my friend Tom makes knives, and my other friend who is part of our group, he also collects vintage military gear, which I also do. I use a lot of old military gear plus camping gear.
I'm a big knife guy, so I collect a lot of old antique knives.
Yeah, well, we do too. And, Tom actually makes knives of different shapes and forms. I'm an axe nut. I'm also really love axes. So now I have this large collection of axes. And, I eventually had too much more I can use. I'm like, well, what should I do with it? Well, I said, well, let's start an Etsy shop. So that's how the Etsy shop got created. And, we also have the component where, I'll do classes locally. I do demonstrations. I've been at Albatwitch doing a fire starting demonstration because I feel it's important for people to learn these skills, or at least get a taste of it and light that spark in them to learn these skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're in the woods, you can take care of yourself. If something happens, I'm not saying walk out laden down with everything, but at the very least, you have a Bic lighter and you know what to do if that Bic lighter breaks. You can still use that spark wheel if you have the right knowledge, and how to find food and water. And I feel that it's something that everybody should know. So I do teach some of that, or, demonstrate some of that. And that's like kind of the learning component of this entity that Ruck Rabbit Outdoors has become. So it's not just an Etsy shop. It's, it's also a learning thing. And still at its core, it's a group of friends that go camping. And that's how that started it.
That's awesome. And I would love to go camping with you guys. That sounds like a hell of a lot of fun.
It is. We have a great time. We've expanded from the original 4 core members to like 8. There are 8 of us. Our friend Steve, who is he's one of my mentors. And that's part of it also, is we teach ourselves. My friend, I have a really good mind as far as like learning foraging plants and all that stuff. And my friend Steve is really good at that. He learned from somebody else. And so I'm learning from these people. I learn from them. They learn from me. And so on and so forth. I'm going to be learning stuff from Tom. And my friend Bob is a really awesome cook. He's the one that's exceptional with knots. He's taught me some knots. I've taught him some stuff. And it goes back and forth. And, we give to each other and we give to others. And we've expanded to about 8 members. And, we had some people camp with us that, they never went camping with us again because, we can't handle cockiness or any of that stuff. And, you know, you get a lot of that in this culture. You get some of these people that are just, they have to be the best at everything. And it's just like, you don't need to be like that. You know, we're just out here to have a good time. And, we'd like to eat well when we're out there. And, we eat gourmet meals that we've cooked over the fire, and we're not typical in, like, you get some of these backpackers who are like, oh, I covered 30 miles today. To us, it's not about that. It's the journey of getting in there. And then when we're there, we have a good time and we experience the place. So I'd rather hike 5 miles or 2 miles and get a lot out of that short area than, cover 20 miles in one day.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely does. And I feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. We immerse ourselves in where we're at, and, we just enjoy being out there. And, it's to the point that when I'm out camping for 2 days or 3 days, or 2 nights or 3 nights, when I come back, I'm just like, oh my God, what did I come back to? Cause I like literally like can't handle all the people.
Right. Yeah. And you just don't want to leave.
No, it's bizarro. I'm much more comfortable in the woods than I am in the city. I am not a city person in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's the same for me.
But yeah, that's how it started, and it's become this thing, and it never was intended to become like an actual business, but it just did. And, here we are, and will it get bigger? I don't know. I mean, if it does, great. I would love to do it for a living, but it's right now, it's just fun. And, it's just something to make a little extra cash on the side. And even then, if I don't make money and I'm just, showing people stuff and, putting some wool clothing in people's hands, that couldn't find it or just didn't have the time, that's what it's all about, and that's what's all really about. So that's how it became to where it is now.
Well, that's awesome.
So.
And, Chad, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad we were able to finally knock this out.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find all your information and everything like that?
You can find us on, we don't have a website. I mean, there is no ruckrabbitoutdoors.com yet. That is something that is going to come to fruition eventually. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, Ruck Rabbit Outdoors. And, of course, you can find us on Etsy, where we have our wares for sale. Currently, right now, the site is a little slim on Etsy, and that's just because we're holding off for some other things that are coming up, namely Albatwitch. We'll be at Albatwitch in October in Columbia. Yeah. So contact us if you're looking for anything specific. We do have things in stock that aren't there, or we can maybe hunt it down for you. Or if it's a knife of some sort, maybe Tom can even make it. So, that's where you can find us. Instagram, Facebook, and the Etsy site.
Awesome. And people also can hear you on Strange Familiars.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can hear me when I'm there on Strange Familiars. I know it's been a while, but Tim's just had other projects that he's been working on. We'll eventually get back to the woods. Right now with the heat, neither one of us really likes the heat. So once it cools down, once, fall and winter comes, you'll probably start hearing more on-site episodes.
Yeah, and I'd love to go out with you if you ever want. I'm happy to come up there. You can come down here. I got some interesting stuff down here as well.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll have to see if we can make that happen sometime.
Yeah, no problem. Well, you have a great night.
And you too.
All right, bye.
Bye.
And that was my interview with Chad Redding. Chad was an awesome guest, and I can't wait to have him on the show again. All of the links to his shop and Strange Familiars will be in the show notes below. That's all for tonight, and as always, I will see you again in the Strange Dominions.